Q-Force is a new Netflix show about a gay spy team, and that's about as dense as the description for the show gets. When the trailer for the show was released, it was met with some negative reactions. The trailer as a whole was just very bad and gave off the feeling of some pandering show that didn't seem funny or interesting at all. The show is presenting itself as a first-of-a-kind animated show where the characters are gay, but currently within animation, even kids animation, there are a ton of already existing gay characters. Stuff like the Owl House and Adventure Time and way more all already have gay characters. So this show kind of presenting itself as, whoa, look at us, we're making an animated show with gay characters, whoa, look how representative we are, was just kind of absurd to me. The trailer in general just looked very bad, and that's why it got this huge negative reaction, because it was just a big stereotypical insult. But at the time, some of the artists and writers came out and said that the show wasn't actually like the trailer. They said that the show was just edited badly and didn't properly represent the quality and tone of the show. But then the show came out, and funnily enough, it is exactly like the trailer. Maybe just a little tiny bit better. So as a fellow Q myself, I decided to dive into the show and express my own thoughts and opinions. So I'm just gonna start off with the obvious. The show isn't good. I'm sure there's a small portion of the gay community that might enjoy something like this, but it personally was not for me. I think it suffered in two primary aspects. The more social representation aspect and just in the general filmmaking aspect. The representation in the show is weird because it mostly just feels like a huge stereotype of the gay community, but it does have some good to it. Bear in mind this good is very little, but it's there. What I'm referring to is the fact that most of the ordinary people that the Q-Force encounter in the show are gay. I like this because it felt like it was providing some genuine commentary on the fact that there are more queer people around the world than people would expect, and they didn't portray the fact that someone was gay as some rare occurrence or some societal deviation. But that's about the only aspect of the representation I liked about the show. I know the whole show is about how the queer spy force is looked down upon because a queer person could never do manly, cool spy stuff, and this message could have been a genuine piece of commentary about how queer people are offended, but this show literally also offends queer people, and this is mainly through the show's jokes and humor. The jokes come across more offensive and stereotypical than actually funny, in my opinion.
Then why did we fight for the ride? We need so much damn margin!
When the artists of this film said that the trailer did not properly represent the show, I did not believe it for a second, because if that sort of comedy and tone was in the trailer, then it was obviously going to make its way into the show, except just more of it. And yeah, the comedy and the tone in the trailer is exactly how it is in the show, and it is painfully unfunny. Most of the comedy was just based on references to something popular within gay culture or popular within current day media. These jokes ranged so much from the mention of OnlyFans at least 3 times to a joke referencing the 2013 documentary Blackfish. Like, what the fuck? And the other majority of the jokes were making reference to sexual innuendos or popular gay slang.
My little butthole went boop!
This is not okay. This needs to stop now.
There was one joke commenting about pandering towards gay people, but this show is literally also pandering towards gay people.
You can't pander to the gays, they can smell it. You're acting like
Netflix.
Get pride.
The comedy was really tough to sit through, especially because it felt so jarring and constant. There couldn't be a serious moment or action scene without somebody cracking out one of these horrendous jokes every minute. And beside from the comedy aspect of the show, the writing in general is lacking. The story was lame, and there were so many conveniences written in to get the story to flow. Like, oh no, a character disappears, but now they conveniently appear again when they're needed for the plot. oh no, the hacker character conveniently can't hack this thing even though they're like one of the best hackers in the world, oh no. The number of times this happened in the show was so annoying, and it was honestly kind of sad. It felt like there were never any consequences for the character's actions or any stakes in the plot because of all the forced conveniences. I wouldn't be as mad about all this stuff if the show actually stuck to one genre and didn't take itself too seriously, but you could see that the show was genuinely trying to add emotional scenes that just didn't pay off. I'm gonna go into spoilers for a second, so skip to this time in the video if you don't want to be spoiled. So in the show, the main character Mary is responsible for the death of a character that was a friend of his boyfriend. Mary, firstly, didn't really seem to care all that much about being the reason for the death of this character. This dead character even ends up haunting Mary as a ghost or some shit, and this plotline is barely used and serves for pretty much nothing besides getting Mary to break up with his boyfriend, which leads to another barely emotional scene as it is glossed over, and Mary again literally doesn't even act like he gave a shit that he just lost his boyfriend. This happens throughout the show a lot, and it's annoying. Another very impactful moment like this I can think of the top of my head is with the character Stat. Stat's like AI girlfriend literally sacrifices herself and dies, and in the next episode Stat literally doesn't give a fuck and she acts like it never happened. Like, this show tries to have these more serious moments, but the emotional beats just don't work, and the show just struggles so much to balance its tone. I found myself comparing this show to BoJack Horseman. I know it's weird because they aren't similar at all, but BoJack Horseman manages to balance its emotional and dramatic beats so well, and this show just did so poorly at that. Another weird thing about the show's writing, or story I guess, was that there were just so many unnecessary scenes of nudity. I'm not like against seeing naked people, but it was just weird in this show because it felt so unnecessary. The nudity was just so distracting and had no context in so many of the scenes it was used in. There was one scene where the main character had to seduce a guy and steal his keycard or some shit, and this was extended to a long gay sex scene for absolutely no reason besides to be like, look, they're gay and they're having sex! This was so unnecessary, and it just felt like the show paused for a second just so it could have some porno for a few minutes, for no purposeful reason at all. One thing that didn't bother me too much about the show was actually the characters. The characters in the show were actually pretty watchable, like I didn't dislike them. They were fine, you know, besides the fact that they were given the worst dialogue through the forced jokes. But yeah, if the show was written slightly better, I think I would have actually liked watching some of these characters. Don't get me wrong, they had absolutely no depth and I didn't relate to any of the characters at all, but I didn't hate any of them. Except Twink.
Hey, bitch!
I'm sorry if I offend anyone by saying this, but goddamn, Twink is one of the most annoying characters ever put to screen. In the show, Twink is a drag queen, and sure, drag queens are a bit extra and flamboyant, but not to the level that this show portrays Twink as. Twink feels like what an old grumpy straight dude thinks of a gay person. They are filled with so many stereotypes and are given the worst personality and comedic lines out of all of the characters.
Can I put some bronzer and lip gloss on it before we take off?
It felt like every time they spoke, I just cringed. Even if they weren't a gay stereotype, I think I still would have disliked this character. They were so whiny and irritating, and they were just sometimes, not all of the time, but sometimes extremely difficult to watch. And they were one of the reasons why this show just really didn't work for me. I feel like I've said this a million times, but they felt like they weren't an actual person, and they were just a build-up of stereotypes and what people perceive gay people to be like, and it was just frustrating to watch. And yeah, those are just my thoughts on Q-Force. It wasn't one of the absolute worst things I've seen, but it was still very hard to watch. I can see how some people may like this, but I think its mostly negative reaction is a good sign that this show was just a very pandering and stereotypical mess that didn't do an entirely good job at representing the gay community. And if anyone is interested, I'm giving Q-Force a 3 out of 10. Bye!